2 people have now died in Manchester at that horrific attack on that synagogue there on Yom Kippur. Thank you, Sophie Ellsworth. Now, we're going to bring you more details on that evolving situation throughout the show. We know that the 2 victims are dead, but joining me now to discuss all this is former Victorian Liberal Party President Michael Kroger and Sky News contributor and my very good friend, Joe Hildebrand. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the program. Before we do anything else, I need to get your reactions to this terrible tragedy, this terrible incident, this terrible attack. And I'm just struck by what, Sophie was saying, because it's more of what we have been hearing from Jewish communities here in Australia and around the world. People are really, really terrified, Joe.
Yeah, and rightly so. And again, we have to wait and see what this person's motives were, but it does very much fit the pattern of attacks on synagogues here in Australia as well. And we know what the motive for those were. And again, I think this is something that happens when you have extremists or people on any side of politics saying that violence is okay, saying that in some cases, if it's your cause or if it's, if the other person's or the other person's people have transgressed enough, that violence in politics is an acceptable way of expressing it. Now, again, this could be just some crazy lone wolf person who's just decided to go and do it for personal reasons of their own accord.
Sure.
But if it is what it very much looks like at this stage, a targeted attack against the Jewish community, then again, this is the consequence of death to the IDF, or people saying that,
globalize the Intifada.
Globalize the Intifada, or saying that, in response to the Charlie Kirk assassination, that sometimes it's okay to kill people or okay to commit violence when it never, ever is.
Michael Kroger, I want to bring you in here. Of course, Melbourne has been the scene of, some terrible incidents involving the Jewish community in synagogues and temples there. Michael, it seems to me that we've had the Palestinian recognition move by both the UK and Australia. We're seeing further protests planned for next week around the anniversary, not by Jewish groups, but by Palestinian groups looking to reprise what happened in Sydney right after the October 7th attacks. Where does all of this lead to? Because it seems like no matter how far we go with recognizing Palestine, they're going, or whatever else, there are people who are just going to be hostile to the Jewish community. Michael, your reaction to this attack, but also more broadly our political considerations around this here in Australia.
Yeah. Well, look, let's be frank. The Palestinian movement obviously have some very genuine, if some misguided, in their belief that there should be a Palestinian state in the current situation, etc., etc. But the undercurrent of a lot of these demonstrators are they're just neo-Nazis. They hate Jews. They hate Israel. They want to wipe Israel off the map. They're Hamas supporters. They carry terrorist flags. They carry the Hamas triangles. They not only yell death to the IDF, they yell death to Netanyahu. Some people going across the bridge, etc., etc. So this is what happens in the Western world, where governments are not strong enough to draw a line. Okay, so free speech has its limits. Defamation laws is one thing. And more recently, over the last 20 or so years, we've had this move, quite correctly, to make hate speech and incitement to violence illegal. And too many Western governments, in weakness and misguided understanding of where this line is, have allowed these Palestinian so-called demonstrations to continue, when in fact many of the undercurrents of these demonstrations are fueled by people who just hate Jews. They're neo-Nazis, Antifa, etc. So, it's all about, it's Palestine. No. We weren't born yesterday. We weren't born yesterday, right? I mean, when that Sydney Harbour Bridge demonstration, and obviously there were some very good people there, genuine people, but boy, there was a lot of absolute human scum at that demonstration. It wasn't a demonstration of peace. It was violent. There was pure hatred towards Jews. It's a sickness, right? Now, Trump has stood up to this, but boy, we've had so many weak Western leaders. We don't need to go through the cavalcade of them. We know who they are. There might be one close to home. And when you see this demonstration coming on the 12th, I call on Chris Minns, who's been very good on these issues. Minns has been very good on these issues. He stood up to the lunatics on the left of the Labor Party. It's now time for Chris Minns to say this demonstration on the 12th of October is not going ahead under any circumstances because it is fuelled by too much Jewish hatred and it incites hatred and violence against Jews, and it's time for Chris Minns to step in and say, this ain't happening on my watch.
Yeah, and Joe, I mean, just to let everybody know, that on October 12th, next weekend, not this coming weekend, next weekend, they're planning a big pro-Palestinian march down to the Opera House forecourt, the same place where they set off flares and chanted really horrific things. Susan Ley has blasted this. Bridget McKenzie has blasted. Where is Prime Minister Anthony Albanese on this? Because, from the very start after this, they played a very double game. You had Penny Wong calling for Israeli restraint after October 7th. You had a lot of ministers like Tony Burke and people like that playing both sides of the fence. You had Tony Burke out welcoming people from Gaza the other day at the airport. Is federal Labor here just weak on this?
I don't think so. No, I mean, federal Labor has just backed Donald Trump's peace plan, so you don't get more on board.
Yeah, but they recognize Palestine.
But so does the peace plan. The peace plan says
after they do what they're supposed to.
That's
after
exactly,
they do what they're supposed to.
That's right, and that's what Australia's condition of recognition also is. Only after democratic elections have been held, for example, and Hamas can have no part in it. It reads almost verbatim like a carbon copy. But having said that, the PM doesn't have jurisdiction to stop the protest taking place. Chris Minns, I know, is still haunted by the fact that the Opera House was used as a backdrop for hatred and hate speech just after the initial terror attacks. He will move to block it and oppose it, just as he did the march on the Harbour Bridge. Sadly, that was then given the go-ahead by the Supreme Court, which, of course, the political authorities can't interfere with. But why that judge made that decision, I find just absolutely mind-boggling. I don't know if that's in contempt of court, but it seemed just insane to me. So I think it is wholly inappropriate. It is clearly piggybacking off the horrendous chants that took place where people were chanting, at best, "Where's the Jews?"
Yeah,
and as a few synagogues have found out, they found them. They found out where they were. So
it wasn't to invite them to an interfaith dinner.
It's not an interfaith barbecue. No.
Joe, let's leave it there.